As Dr. Williams mentioned, the board and conversations have existed for the last 2.5 years. And I think Mr. Posnow's introduction this evening certainly teed this up nicely when we start talking about the complexities of where we are with organizing the goals of the district and how they align with our finances, facilities, and our instructional programming. So what I'm going to share this evening is kind of unpack where we are to date with this committee and the steps moving forward. So I'm kind of take a trip down memory lane, and similar to what Dr. Williams said, we came to these crossroads both in our facilities and finance meetings as well as our academic standards meeting, where we kind of started to join in these questions about our fiscal responsibilities, our facility responsibilities, and inevitably our responsibilities to our learners, and trying to sort out a direction. And that of course led the charge that we have before us as a committee, where we're seeking options for optimal academic opportunities for all YS students, built in a system that's sustainable for our fiscal and facility means. So kind of to talk a little bit about where we're going, you'll recognize this stool. Dr. Williams has shared this on many occasions. This three-legged stool represents kind of the structure of where we've been going with these conversations. Specifically dependent legs of the stool, educational program, finance, facilities, supporting the goals of our district, those 4 beacons. And then of course that holds above us our vision, our end in mind of where we're going. And then of course the mission and how we're getting there. So that's kind of been our guiding structure that we've been talking about. And as Dr. Williams had mentioned, we're seeing some fractures along the way in some of these legs to this stool, which of course requires us to dig a little bit deeper into the complexities. So when we look at each one of these legs of that stool in its independent state, they become very complex. So first of all, our educational programming certainly involves our students and our teachers, the high quality teaching and learning that's occurring inside the classrooms, how we're meeting the needs of our students, how we're meeting the needs of the diversity within our students, and their individual needs as they move forward. Mr. Posnow did an excellent job talking about the complexities with finance and that growing concern we have, both what we're getting from the state or not getting from the state, and how that's applying to our revenue and expenditures. And then lastly, we have the complexities of our facilities. We're fortunate enough to have a variety of beautiful structures here at the York Suburban School District, but some are aging and these facilities are in growing need. When you begin to bring those complex natures together, they really start to overlap. And that's where we see the 3 legs of that stool really kind of come together as a whole. And when we start to think about ourselves as a system and we start to really kind of tease out and lay those complexities over and over again, it becomes more comprehensive, it becomes a little bit larger, and inevitably it paints a picture of who we are. So knowing that there's the complexities, these 3 legs of that stool, we need to take who we are as an organization, to come back to where we're going with our district goals, and slowly lay over these complexities. And this will be hopefully our binding point as we begin this process. So from this end and the charge from the board, we began the process of how to organize these 3 legs of that stool to begin the process to unpack options and proposal for the board by November. So to do that, first, as always, we start with that vision, which we've continued to talk about, the hard work and dedication from the individuals involved with the comprehensive plan, unpack that vision of where we're going. That's our end in mind. The board then worked closely to align these strategic principles. So this kind of opens the framework, then how we're working within those 3 stool legs to think of our instructional planning as well as our physical plan and fiscal means. These principles help guide the directions of this committee as we're moving forward to ensure that we have the sustainability as well as meeting the needs of all of our learners. And of course, lastly, we put our boots on the ground and we work to achieve that through our bold future actions. So I want to pause for a moment, and when we began this process and we started to bring the community together at an administrative level, we continue to talk about a systems approach here. If we go back in time, and I'll use Mr. Posnow's intro there, we talked about, a fair funding formula of the past, which was everybody got equal, everyone was treated the same. Well, that's not how it works anymore, and we need to generate a level of equity and move away from equality, because every single person or event needs to have access, and that access is what we want to achieve here. We want to be given different supports to help them achieve and make access, and using a game, for example. So using this equity lens, we really started to look at our system, and here's where we start to say, okay, we have an opportunity now to look and propose for the board options at a systems level. So what systemic barriers can we start to reduce to reduce those needs for supports and accommodations. So looking at the fence as something as a barrier, so we want to keep our eye on the equity, providing available access to all, but how do we build a system that allows us to reduce those as much as possible so that we can achieve that equity at a high level? So how do we do that? Again, you'll notice this fine-dressed gentleman is trying to reduce the questions that have come along on this journey. So the first one is this focus on our learning, which is our educational program. And this committee is representative of teachers, students, community members, administrators, and we're working together to make a sense of where we are as a learning community, what we need, using the guiding goals of the comprehensive plan to lay that structure in place. Similar to that three-legged stool, we do have to come back to those other two components. And the next is sustainability. How are we going to have a fiscal process in place? So here's where Mrs. Ciucciulli and her team are really starting to dive into what does it look like from a financial lens to help us develop something that's sustainable that will inevitably meet with both ends of our learning, and lastly now the environment. So we've worked with and recruited the use of Crabtree Rurbon Associates to dive into our environments. They're familiar with our systems. They've had an opportunity to review some of our feasibility options, so they can start to bring together this data and this piece. So inevitably, we can come back together to come to that single direction of where we want to go and think about the future and what are we focused on to ensure that we're addressing the needs of all of our students and all of their learning at the optimal academic opportunity in a sustainable way that's fiscally sound and responsible, and creates and ensures the environments or our facilities are matched and aligned to create equity and reduce as much as possible inhibitors for each student to reach that access. So how do we do that? Well, it really requires these three groups together to engage in a series of activities as we move forward. So you can kind of see these three committees. As I mentioned, the Learning Future Focused Learning Committee, Crabtree Rurbon Associates is really focusing on our structures and our facilities. And then of course, Mrs. Ciucciulli in the business office at the bottom is working on our finances. So through the months of April and May, we're gathering information and analyzing data. This week, the community committee will be meeting. Where we're really going to assess what information we have on hand, pick up where the comprehensive plan left off, and prepare the first stages in data collection of our students, our community, our parents, our teachers, through a series of surveys, focus groups, and begin to lay that foundation. At the same time, Crabtree Rurbon Associates is doing a deep dive into our existing facilities plans. What has the feasibilities told us? What has the mechanical studies told us? And really do a thorough analysis of what do our structures look like? Where are our strengths and weaknesses? What's the long-term sustainability? Kind of package all of these conversations that have been going over for the last 2 years into something that we can engage in. And then lastly, as I said, Mrs. Ciucciulli and her team is working on that financing. So through the months of June and July, we're going to start to present that data and seek feedback, both feedback from the board as well as feedback from the community. And that may look like an open meeting. It might be, again, COVID specific. It might be something that's in a virtual setting similar to our board meetings, but we have a chance to share what we've gathered so far, solicit feedback from the community, and then begin to gauge the board's guidance and will on where we're going to move. Because eventually, as you can see, these three binds have to come together. And this is where we really start to tie back into the pieces, how these three legs of that stool return in September and October to start to develop some options that are going to really enhance, as the board has charged us, optimal academic opportunities for all of our students in a sustainable framework with our facilities and our finances. And then lastly, have those recommendations for the board in November. So with that in mind, one of the things that I do want to close with is that in the short term, and it's, I think, interesting to say that in the short term, we're talking about a fine group of kindergartners you see before us. This is a class of our students. This is the class of 2033. But the reason why we're saying future focused, that's just our first cohort of kindergarten. We have to keep a lens in our minds to say, where's the sustainability for longer than that? Although 2033 sounds like, a long way away, this is the complexity of the task at hand, and really, I think, a part that excites the members of the committee, certainly all the individuals that I've spoken with, because they see the value and power in this process and see the value and investment that they have and willing to be a part of it. So with that, I'll turn it over to see if there's any questions.
Really? No questions?
Great. So we'll like I mentioned, our community meeting is this week. And again, we're working tight, very closely with Crabtree Ruhrbaugh Associates. So we'll maintain that communication to eventually bring those bands back together. But we will be returning to the board for feedback and guidance as our data collection and our process starts to unfold in the coming weeks and coming months.
Just quick question, sorry, as I'm processing this.
Absolutely.
So when you come to the table with recommendations in November, like what does that look, what do you envision that looking like? Like actionable items, or is this high level where we're going to continue a discussion? Well, I shouldn't say we, whatever the new board looks like in December.
I believe our hope is that we're going to come to the table in November with some actionable items, because that is really the last kind of drop dead date if we want to make anything possible in any of the coming years. We have I believe, a high need for some end of life facility items that drive a lot of this conversation. I think that's where the complexity comes in. We don't want to rush the discussions on our academic opportunities and how that can meld well together and how they coalesce. But I do believe the goal of the committee and our charge will be to deliver to the board actionable options for them to make action on in that month of December or November if they so choose.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Krauser, do you have information at this point on how a member of the public might view this committee meeting, or I'm assuming it'll be online. Is there information available about that?
Sure. Great question. Well, the first committee meeting we're having is the working committee. So it's really for us to kind of sort and organize. The first feedback committee absolutely be publicized. We'll have that available, and we'll meet whatever needs the current state allows. If we have to run more than one meeting on multiple sides of town, we will do that. But the meeting this week is really the members of the individuals that have kind of stepped forward and will be on site to put some of the footwork in place that generates the focus group questions, that kind of develops our needs assessment and put some of those layers in place.
So that's not a public meeting?
The first one this Wednesday is more of the steering committee to drive that learning part. We will have a public meeting. More than likely, we're set for kind of mid-June is where we're thinking by the time we collect the data back. What we'd like to do is collect all the data that we receive from our stakeholders, synthesize it, and then report that out so that members of the community can kind of hear where we are in probably more of a controlled fashion, so they can hear what's been said, what's been shared, how that aligns to district goals, and what direction we're going to head.
I'm just mindful of, since this is a ad hoc committee, technically from the school board, what kind of sunshine laws we need to be mindful of. And I'll let you guys figure that out. It just occurred to me that, that's something we'll have to be mindful of. But thank you for your information.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Thank you very much, Dr. Krauser. We look forward to your continued reports from this ad hoc committee. Tonight,